What is up, friends? Welcome back to episode 2 as Brennen and I go through each of the Packers' 9 draft picks. If you missed the first one, check it out. We went through Eric Stokes, his game, the good. There's really not much bad to talk about, but areas that he needs to improve on. And now we're going to look ahead to pick 62, Josh Myers, center from Ohio State. So I'll start by saying I did not expect the Green Bay Packers to go with an interior offensive lineman whatsoever. I thought that tackle was the play. Even with David Bakhtiari, it's a thin group, but it is an especially thin group without him. And obviously, this is talking before the 2 additions that they made. But it was Billy Turner, Elton Jenkins, and Yosh Nijman. The duo of Turner and Jenkins, assuming they're both 100% healthy, I think that's fine. They can absolutely get by with that group and be fine. But if one of them's injured, they're relying on Yosh Nijman, who has 15 career snaps. We have no idea where he's at in his development. And beyond that, there isn't anyone else on the roster who had any sort of tackle experience. So that's the route that I thought they were going to go. Obviously, they didn't. They went with an interior offensive lineman. So Brennen, Josh Myers, interior offensive lineman. Let's just start with the position because we'll get into Myers, Creed Humphrey, and that coming up. But just the position itself, were you surprised that that's the route that they decided to go?
I wasn't necessarily surprised because it is somewhat of a position of need after losing Corey Linsley. But like you said, I thought tackle was going to be a pick if they went offensive line because it's the second most important position in football outside of quarterback. And you have David Bakhtiari, Turner, who could end up playing guard possibly. And then you have Elton Jenkins, who is probably can play anywhere. Outside of those 3, there's not much there. And we found out in the NFC Championship game that tackle is a very important position. We found out in the Super Bowl that tackle is a very important position. If you didn't know, now you know that's a position that you need to have some players at. And so I was kind of surprised that it was interior, but at the same time, it does fill a need per se. So
Absolutely. And I mean, a big part of this offensive line success last year was their depth and their ability to move guys around. You know, they suffered a ton of injuries. Guys had to shuffle, change positions, but week in and week out, really until the Buccaneers game in week 7 or in the NFC Championship game, and I guess the first time that they played them as well, those are really the 2 blips on the radar that they had despite all that movement. Because what we saw from this offensive line unit last year, given the injuries, that's not common, folks. No. Most of the time when you see the amount of injuries that the Packers had, Bakhtiari being out, Corey Linsley being out, the shuffling that had to take place, offensive lines crumble, but the Packers didn't. They lost a big piece in the middle with Corey Linsley, and this was their way of trying to replace it with Josh Myers. So let's just talk about Josh Myers here. On the board, and who actually went right after him, was Creed Humphrey, center from Oklahoma, who, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that just about everyone had as center 1 on their board. Incredibly effective player, no sacks allowed during his 3 years at Oklahoma, and he never gave up more than 11 pressures in a season. Also tested incredibly well at his pro day. So obviously we're not in the Green Bay Packers war room. We don't know what the exact reasoning was, but if you could enlighten us, Brennen, is there anything that stood out to you as why they went with Josh Myers over Creed Humphrey?
My only explanation is they thought Creed Humphrey was gone. That's honestly the only thing. Like you said, he was center 1 for a lot of people. Maybe center 2 if you wanted to throw Lander Dickerson as a center. But I was surprised. You touched on everything. He was excellent in pass pro. He's great in run blocking. He didn't give up a sack. Tested through the roof. It looked like a Goody pick. And if they were going to go center, that's who I thought he was going to take. And I honestly thought Creed Humphrey was in play at 29 just because he tested the wall and checked a lot of the boxes. But yeah, if you had to ask me why is Creed or Myers over Creed, that would be my guess, is that they just thought he had been taken already. I don't know.
I think that's what a lot of us are wondering. And this is definitely one of those selections that are going to be tied together, at least for Packers fans, Josh Myers and Creed Humphrey, just depending to see what the trajectory of their careers look like. So now let's focus specifically on Josh Myers. What I really like about him and what I've seen from him since the Packers drafted him is a lot of the clips that I've watched, he's at the second level. He's hustling downfield, making blocks. And I absolutely love that. I mean, think about the big runs that Aaron Jones busted last season. A number of them where Bakhtiari, Corey Linsley, Elton Jenkins, they had the offensive lineman at the second level. They had those guys running downfield. And not going to pretend that I watched a lot of Josh Myers, but in the parts that I did, that was something that really stood out to me. So what do you like about his game and what he brings to the Packers?
Yeah, you touched on it, and that's maybe the reason why they took him. I know it was the scout. I can't remember what his name is. He talked about the energy that Myers played with, and that's something they really liked. He likes the energy they brought to the locker room. So maybe that could be an explanation right there of why they liked him. But like you said, he plays with a lot of energy. He has some raw power to him. He can overwhelm guys at the point of attack with his brute strength. He has a powerful upper body and a strong hands that can stun defensive linemen. So it wasn't the sexiest pick per se. I mean, drafting a center never is, but I think he's going to be a guy that could have a decade-long career playing center and being the anchor of the offensive line.
It almost feels like that, and I think every coach obviously wants that hustle, that extra level, going beyond really what you're tasked to do. And I feel like that's something though that really sticks with LeFlore. Like if we look back at last year's draft, Josiah DeGuara, that's just LeFleur talked about showing that play the season before where he runs after the guy downfield, chases him after an interception. I feel like just based on some of the draft picks, that's something that LeFleur really pounds the table for. And understandably so, you want those high energy guys, those guys that are going to go beyond. And it shows in the receiver room too, with the blocking ability that's expected. So I wonder if that was part of it as well, where that's something that really, we were talking about why Myers over Humphrey. I wonder if that's something that in LeFleur's book, checking that box means an awfully lot. So now, go on.
No, I was just going to go off topic for a second and say that's part of the reason why I thought Amon-Ra St. Brown was going to be a Packers guy too, just because he had that energy and blocked really well. So I totally agree that maybe this was a LeFleur pick saying, no, if I want a center, give me this guy because of the energy he plays with.
And since we're off topic, let's just keep rolling. Going on with the LeFleur pick, one thing that I do really like about Brian Gutekunst's drafts is you can tell that, and this sounds really dumb, really simplified, like a no duh, everyone should do that, but I don't think it's done, is you can tell he goes and gets the guys that LeFleur wants. A.J. Dillon, Josiah DeGuara, Josh Myers. I mean, there's a number of picks where you can tell that these are the guys that he needs to make this offense work, so I'm going to go get him those guys. Now, whether that ends up working out or not, that's really a different question. But he's buying into what LeFleur does, and obviously that's easier to do now when you have the top scoring offense in football. But I think that Brian Gutekunst has done a very good job of that since LeFleur was brought in and they took over. He goes and gets the guys. And I know that's simple, but I don't think that's something that every general manager does.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be something that we talk about with a later pick too in the next round about
absolutely
this offense and maybe just take it to another level. So I agree with that 100%. It's simplified, but I don't think it's done very often at all.
So back to Myers, where are some areas that he can improve upon?
He needs to refine his technique as a pass protector. I think Pro Football Focus had him for 6 sacks given up over the last 2 seasons. And actually, Austin Ward, who is an Ohio State beat writer that I talked to when I did my profile on Myers, said that Myers even admitted that he needs to work on his pass protection. It was something that was a big adjustment for him getting to the college level. So I think that's part of his game that he needed to work on. I think that's about it, though, really. I mean, I think he's a very clean prospect. And again, it wasn't the sexiest pick. It wasn't someone that's going to make Packer fans go to the pro shop and buy his jersey. But I think he's going to be an anchor of this offensive line for quite some time.
What did you see on the tape in regards to his just functional athleticism, especially coming to the wide zone scheme that LeFleur runs here in Green Bay? I believe he had turf toe towards the end of the season. So he didn't participate in the pro day other than the bench press, so he put up 29 reps on. But his functional athleticism, what have you seen from him?
I don't think that's an issue at all. I think he plays a lot of injury. He gets to the second level pretty easily. He usually hits his targets when he's out there. So I think he's a very fluid athlete for a man his size. And I think all those things where he's getting out in space is not going to be an issue at all for him.
So as we look ahead to week 1, I'm going to go under the assumption that David Bakhtiari is going to be sidelined still. He was, when he suffered that, like the very beginning of January, end of December. So 9 months, which is a common recovery period, puts them at the beginning of September. But we know that the Green Bay Packers are historically a very conservative organization when it comes to injuries and giving guys additional time. So until we see otherwise, I'm still going to operate under that mindset. So if we're going to assume that Elton Jenkins and Billy Turner are our tackles in going into week 1, is it pretty much set in stone that Josh Myers is going to be the starting center, or do you think that Lucas Patrick could still have a chance at that position?
I think it's going to be Myers. He's going to have competition, like you said. Lucas Patrick is going to fight for that spot. Even Royce Newman has a chance to play center. I know they talked about how he played some center in the Senior Bowl. But I think even if Bakhtiari is healthy, I think your starting line is Bakhtiari, Jenkins, Myers, and then a combination of Lucas Patrick or John Runyon, and then Billy Turner. That's who I think would be the starting 5. But if I had to put a wager on it, I think Josh Myers is the starting center week 1.
And one thing that I really popped during training camp last year that I really liked that LeFlore did was the whole offensive line was, or I guess I should say not the whole offensive line, but the entire right side of the offensive line was completely up for grabs. Just because Rick Wagner was the veteran free agent brought in, he was not sharpied into that starting right tackle spot like we all thought. He started the season on the bench because Lane Taylor showed out at right guard. Billy Turner showed out at right tackle. So that's something with the offensive line, and we'll definitely get into it more when we get to the day 3 selections, adding Newman, adding Van Lanen, who are tackles, but at the NFL level, I think many agree that their guard might be their best position. And the Packers' interior offensive line there's just a lot of people there, a lot of bodies to say the least. And like I said, I don't want to get into it too much, but again, it brings back to the question about tackle depth, because Van Lanen and Newman aren't going to be ready week 1 to play tackle. So really, where does that leave them? That's for another day, though. We'll get to that when we get to rounds 4 and 6. So this will wrap it up for Josh Myers. As always, guys, I appreciate you joining me. My name is Paul Brettel. You can find me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. My work's at Dairyland Express as well as Cheesehead TV. Brennan, let everyone know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Royal_Roop, and then you can find my work at Game On Wisconsin.
Again, thank you for joining us, everyone. We'll be back in a couple days taking a look at round 3. I think it's my favorite pick. I think it's going to be everyone's favorite pick, though, heading in with, pairing it with this LeFlore offense, and that's Amari Rodgers. So stay tuned for that. And as always, thanks for joining us.